I conducted a poll on my YouTube community tab asking people if they thought that vampires were cryptids. And after almost 40 votes, the results were shockingly split down the middle. Literally, 51% of the people that voted yes. And if you're one of the 49% of the people that voted no, or if you're just rolling in here after the fact and you didn't know about the poll, let me explain. I believe that vampires are, in fact, cryptids. And here's why. When you hear the word vampire, what comes to mind? A pale figure in a black cape? Maybe? Sharp fangs? Maybe a Transylvanian accent? But if you step outside of pop culture for just a moment and you strip away the Hollywood polish and, the gothic romance and the supernatural theatrics, look at the roots of the vampire legend, the raw historical accounts, and the consistent sightings across cultures, and the behavioral patterns attributed to these beings. Now ask yourself this: are we actually looking at a cryptid? Because the more you analyze the data, the clearer I think it becomes. Vampires meet the criteria. Now, if you Google the words cryptid definition, the lame AI overview says something like, a cryptid is a creature whose existence is claimed, often in folklore or rumors, but has not been scientifically proven or recognized. Some examples include Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and the Jersey Devil. And there's an even more detailed explanation just below that says cryptids are animals or creatures that are mentioned in folklore or other accounts, but whose actual existence is questionable or unproven by scientific evidence. Now, there's two words in that expanded definition, and that's animals, which I don't think that we can call vampires animals. Well, you know what? Some of them turn into bats, right? So maybe, but that's a stretch. I don't think I'm going to go there. But there is another word right next to that, and that is creatures. You can kind of call anything a creature, and I think vampires fit that description. Some cryptids are thought to be surviving prehistoric animals. I get that. Others are theorized to be entirely new species, and some are even said to have paranormal characteristics. But they all share three key traits, and that's one, eyewitness reports, which often span decades or even centuries sometimes. Two, a persistent presence in folklore or oral tradition, right? It's like campfire stories. And three, a lack of definitive scientific evidence despite recurring patterns of sightings. So, does the vampire fit into that structure? Let's take a look. The earliest known vampire accounts didn't come from fiction. They came from legitimate official records, court testimonies, and even medical reports. For an example, in 1725, Austrian authorities investigated the death of a man named Peter Blagojevich. After he died, 9 others in his village reportedly succumbed to an illness after seeing him in the night. The people that lived in that village, they all exhumed his body, and what they found was that it was he was fresh. And the body also had fresh blood around the mouth. Now, the state commissioned a full report and documented the staking and the burning of his corpse. And this was not just a one-off incident either. Between the 1720s and the 1730s, Serbia and all of its surrounding regions experienced a wave of vampire-related panic, so significant that they triggered the direct involvement from the Habsburg monarchy. These were not random folktales. They were officially logged investigations by military officers and medical personnel. Now, let's talk about the geographical patterns. Cryptids often appear regionally. Nessies in Scotland, the Yetis in the Himalayas, and the Jersey Devil is in Arizona, obviously. Just seeing if you're paying attention. He's in New Jersey. Vampires show the same pattern of localized repetition. In Eastern Europe, and forgive me, these are called Vrykolakas, Strigoi, or just Nosferatu. They're undead creatures that return from the grave to drain the life from the living. In 19th century New England, people were fearing a different version of this. For example, in Exeter, Rhode Island, Mercy Brown's body was exhumed and her heart was burned after locals blamed her for draining the life of her brother after she died. Again, Not a ghost story. Dude, this was front page news. In Malaysia, there's something called a penangala. It's a vampire-like being with internal organs trailing behind its floating head. Oh, it sounds terrifying. That's multiple continents, across multiple cultures, each with its own version of the same archetype. This blood-drinking entity, often humanoid, tied to nocturnal behavior and death. If we saw that level of cross-culture consistency with any other consistency, we would consider it a strong cryptid classification. I hear you, though. The usual counter-offer is something like, but cryptids are supposed to be mysterious animals, right? Vampires are undead. They're supernatural. That makes them completely different, doesn't it? But my answer, and 51% of everybody else's answer, is no, not exactly. And that's because many creatures that are considered to be cryptids exhibit allegedly supernatural features. The Mothman, glowing red eyes, and is somewhat of a harbinger of doom. The Skinwalker is said to shapeshift. The Flatwoods monster emitted toxic gas and floated above the ground, yet these beings are still being discussed under the umbrella of cryptozoology. Why? Because people can see them. They're experienced by eyewitnesses, and those witnesses describe consistent behavior over time. In this context, vampires are not an outlier. They're part of the same pattern, and that pattern is beings that occupy this gray space between biological and paranormal. We can go even deeper. Cryptids are often assumed to be biological animals. If vampires can't be explained by biology, doesn't that disqualify them? If you're picking up what I'm putting down, then you can probably guess that my answer is going to be no, not necessarily. Blood feeding, or what it's more medically known as is hematophagy, exists in nature, in vampire bats, kangaroo fish, leeches. Even the oxpecker bird feeds on the blood of larger mammals. That's the animal kingdom. And if we step into speculative biology, the rest of the vampire package starts to feel plausible. The sensitivity to light, that's found in many nocturnal and cave-dwelling species. The avoidance of garlic, I know that sounds silly, but hear me out. Certain animals avoid strong-smelling compounds due to chemical sensitivity. And also the aversion to silver. That could just be folk memory of a rare allergic or toxic reaction to something. In fact, some researchers in the 21st century proposed the idea of undiagnosed or ferric disorders, which is really just a genetic condition that causes sensitivity to sunlight and a more pallid appearance, right? More pale. They propose this as a potential origin for vampire myths. So, while there may not be a cataloged species of vampire, the traits themselves aren't biologically impossible. They're just misunderstood for now. If vampires are cryptids, then we should expect recent sightings, right? We have them, we do. In the 1970s London, multiple witnesses reported a tall, spectral figure in Highgate Cemetery with, follow me now, pale skin, red eyes, and vanishing upon approach. The Highgate Vampire, which is what they called it, prompted media coverage and even amateur investigations. In Malawi in 2002, widespread panic broke out over alleged vampire attacks. Locals reported beings entering their homes, draining blood, and then disappearing into the night. Even several deaths occurred from this. Not by vampire, I'll admit, but from mob justice against the accused individuals. The U.S. Embassy even issued a statement due to the scale of unrest, and there are much quieter stories too. Urban legends about urban figures spotted in forests, mountain passes, or even abandoned buildings. Travelers that were attacked on roads, corpses that were discovered with inexplicable wounds. Are these all hoaxes? Are they misidentifications? Yeah, some might be for sure, but not all of them. Cryptozoologists don't claim that every Bigfoot sighting is valid. They look for patterns, and the vampire pattern still shows up. Now, there still might be a small group of people out there that are saying, dude, vampires are just literary, man, they're pure fiction, end of story. But my answer, and hopefully most of our answers by now, is fiction doesn't arise in a vacuum. Bram Stoker did not invent vampires. He compiled them. He synthesized regional legends and historical accounts into a single narrative. Folklore precedes fiction. And when you examine the pre-literary vampire, the ones that came before Dracula, before Anne Rice, before Twilight, what you find looks much less like a romantic metaphor and much more like a cryptid. A predatory being that's feared in a rural community, and it's often associated with disease or death, and reportedly encountered by a person or multiple people. If you remove the layers of fiction, the vampire becomes less magical and more zoological, and that's the version that we see in the historical records. Vampires appear in global folklore across time and cultures. They've been the subject of documented reports, complete with exhumations and official investigations. Their behaviors mirrors patterns seen and recognized in cryptids. Nocturnal habits, regional clustering, and these predatory/prey dynamics. Modern science cannot confirm them. However, people continue to report sightings just like they do with every other cryptid. Their traits, although extreme, are biologically inspired and culturally consistent. So because of that, yes, by every metric, that applies to cryptids. Vampires qualify. Vampires are, and always have been, contenders for one of the most persistent and most misunderstood cryptids in human history. And if that challenges what you thought you knew about vampires, then great. Dude, if I was able to give you a new perspective on vampires or cryptids, then hit like and click subscribe if you're not already, and aggressively share this with your friends that like stuff like this. Also, let me know in the comments which topics you want me to cover next. I like doing these thoughtful, analytical deep dives into weird horror things. That's what I'm into. I'll see you in the next one.